The clock on the dash read 2:17 a.m. In the world of an old man driving a new-age taxi, that's when the real quiet settles in. Not the peaceful quiet, mind you, but the deep, heavy silence of a city that's either asleep or up to no good. My name is Arthur. I've been driving these streets for 40 years, first in a beat-up checker cab, now in this borrowed sedan, ferrying the secrets of the night from one dim streetlight to the next.
You see a lot of things from behind the wheel, enough to fill a library of unfinished novels, and every now and then, a story comes along that doesn't just stick with you, it wraps itself around your soul and squeezes. I was parked down near the industrial district, nursing a lukewarm coffee and listening to some classic jazz, the kind that makes you feel like the world might still make sense, when the ride request flashed across the screen. Pick up, 14th Street Terminal. Destination, a remote spot outside the city limits, right near the old, abandoned quarry road. Long ride, good pay, bad feeling. We old-timers learn to trust that knot in the stomach. It's an unpaid guide, usually pointing you away from trouble. But tonight the payment was too good to ignore. Bills don't care about bad feelings. I accepted the fare. The 14th Street Terminal isn't a nice place after midnight. It's where the trains stop running, the lights are half dead, and the shadows are thick enough to hide anything. As I pulled up to the designated pin, I saw him immediately. He wasn't standing in the normal waiting area. He was pressed against the brick wall near a closed-off maintenance entrance, cloaked in an oversized dark hoodie, hands jammed deep into his pockets. Even from 20 feet away, the tension rolling off him was palpable, like heat from asphalt on a summer day. He looked less like a passenger and more like a fugitive waiting for an escape artist. I flicked on my interior light. He didn't move until I gave a soft, patient honk. Then he moved fast. A sudden, unnatural burst of speed. He yanked the back door open, practically dove inside, and slammed the door shut with a finality that echoed in the empty lot. I barely had time to greet him. "Good evening, sir. Going to the quarry road?" His voice was a low, gravelly whisper, barely audible over the idling engine. It was tight, like a wire pulled too taut. "Just drive, now. Go, don't wait." I've had demanding passengers, sure, but there was something in his tone. It wasn't just impatience. It was pure, unadulterated fear, a fear that was contagious. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up, and I pulled out of the terminal faster than I should have. The car felt different with him inside, heavier, somehow colder. I glanced in the rearview mirror. His face was obscured by the shadows of the hood, but I could make out the frantic movement of his eyes darting from side to side, scanning the buildings we passed. He was watching for someone. You got a name, friend?" I tried to keep my voice light, professional. He didn't answer right away. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. "Sam," he finally muttered. "Just Sam." The first 10 minutes were silent, save for the hum of the tires on the asphalt. We left the brightly lit avenues and started heading onto the interstate, the city lights fading slowly behind us. I could feel his gaze fixed on the back of my head. It made me self-conscious, like I was driving poorly, or maybe worse, like I was part of whatever nightmare he was living. I tried again to break the tension. "Long drive tonight. Everything okay back there? Looks like you had a rough night." He shifted abruptly. The sound of something scraping against the synthetic seat cover made me jump. "I'm fine," he snapped. His voice was sharper now. "Just keep your eyes on the road, driver, and keep the speed up. I'm going the limit, Sam. Don't worry. We'll be there soon enough. What's out there anyway? That old quarry road is mostly deserted." He let out a shaky breath that sounded more like a stifled sob. "It's a safe spot. That's what's out there. The only spot." He hesitated. Then his voice dropped to that whisper again, laced with a desperation that was heartbreaking. "You ever feel like you're being hunted, old man?" That question hit me hard. You see, I'm used to the transactional nature of the job. You tell me where to go, I take you there. This wasn't a transaction. This was a plea for help, veiled as small talk. I could have shut down. I could have told him it wasn't my business. But when someone asks you that, at 3 a.m. in the darkness of a lonely highway, you listen. "I've had my share of bad nights, Sam," I admitted, glancing again at his form in the mirror, still just a shadow. "We all carry things that follow us, but I hope whatever you're running from isn't too fast." He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Oh, they're fast, and they're organized. They don't forget, they don't forgive, and they never, ever let go. The way he spoke, it wasn't about the police or some simple trouble. This sounded like something far darker, something personal and relentless. I tightened my grip on the wheel. Now my own fear was mixing with his. I was an unwitting participant in a high-stakes game I didn't understand. We drove in silence again for a long stretch. The highway gave way to state roads, and the smooth asphalt turned into bumpy, neglected pavement. The trees on either side began to press in, making the night feel smaller, claustrophobic. The air in the car was thick with Sam's anxiety. I could practically taste it. Suddenly, Sam leaned forward, his hands gripping the back of my seat, making the leather squeak. It was the first time he'd moved aggressively. "Look," he rasped, his breath hot on my neck. "There's a small dirt track, maybe half a mile ahead. It goes into the woods. It's barely visible. Don't miss it. You have to turn there. I need to get off this main road." I checked the GPS. The official route still showed us going another 5 miles before making the final turn. "That's not the route, Sam, and this road is getting pretty rough. I don't think my car is going to handle a dirt track very well." "I don't care about your damn car," he hissed, louder this time. The sudden burst of volume startled me. "Just do what I say. Turn. If we keep going on this road, it's only a matter of minutes until they know exactly where I'm headed. The tracking is too easy." His fear had broken the dam. He was unraveling. I could feel my heart pounding against my ribs. I had a choice: stick to the app's route and risk whatever they were finding him, and maybe me, or deviate and follow the instructions of a clearly terrified man. In this line of work, you learn sometimes the rules are less important than survival. I slowed down, looking for the track he described. It wasn't marked. It was just a barely visible rupture in the tree line, a dark slit in the darkness. "All right, Sam," I sighed, my voice calm despite the adrenaline rush. "I see it. I'm turning." I eased the car off the main road and onto the narrow, uneven dirt track. The car protested immediately. Gravel spit, tires spun slightly, and the suspension groaned under the strain. We were swallowed by the woods. The headlights were now the only source of light in a suffocating tunnel of trees. The air grew colder. Sam let out a small, relieved moan. He had pulled off the hoodie, and I dared a longer look in the mirror. His face was pale, slick with sweat, and his eyes, they were wide, red-rimmed, and looked permanently etched with panic. He was younger than I thought, maybe early 30s, but aged prematurely by stress. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, and I could see a dark stain beneath it. Blood. "How much further on this track?" I asked, keeping my focus on navigating the deep ruts. "Not far," he whispered, his voice oddly calm now, as if crossing the threshold into the woods had given him a momentary respite. "Just to the bend where the old creek bed used to run, you'll see a large dead oak tree. That's it." As we approached the bend, the silence returned, heavier and more complete than before. I slowed the car to a crawl. The dead oak stood out starkly against the backdrop of living pines, a grim marker in the desolate landscape. I stopped the car right beside it. I put the transmission into park, my foot hovering over the brake. My shift was over, but the ride was not. "Not yet. We're here, Sam. End of the line. That'll be $73.50. I tried to sound businesslike. Sam didn't reach for his wallet. He didn't even acknowledge the fare. He was staring out the window, looking deep into the blackness of the trees, his breathing shallow and quick. Then he turned his head and looked directly at me in the rearview mirror. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes that wasn't just fear. It was a terrifying mix of resignation and warning. He didn't say thank you. He didn't apologize for the trouble. He said 4 words that I will never, ever forget. "If you drop me here, they'll find me." My blood ran cold. I immediately started to turn around, about to ask what the hell he meant, when he threw his door open. I instinctively reached out to grab him, to tell him to pay the fare, to tell him he was being reckless, but he was already gone. One moment, his shadow was framed in the open doorway. The next, he had vanished into the dense undergrowth, without a sound, without a trace, like smoke in the wind. The door was left ajar, swinging slightly in the dead calm air. He hadn't paid. He hadn't even looked back. I sat there, engine idling, staring into the woods, listening to the absolute, suffocating silence. The clock on the dash now read 3:09 a.m. I was alone, deep in the woods, with an empty back seat, a $73.50 unpaid fare, and a haunting 4-word confession echoing in the stale air of my cab. Who was they? And why did he just leave me, Arthur, the old cab driver, alone in the woods to be the last person who saw him? The questions were just starting to form, heavy and frightening. The silence was a physical weight, pressing in on the car, on my chest. It wasn't the silence of peace, it was the abrupt, shocked vacuum left by a sudden, violent exit. Sam's last words, "If you drop me here, they'll find me," ricocheted in the confined space, hanging in the air like a ghostly fog. He hadn't just run, he had fled, leaving me, Arthur, the old cab driver, as the only evidence of his passing. The open back door, framed by the skeletal branches of the dead oak, felt like an invitation to disaster. For a long moment, I was frozen. My hands were still gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white. The digital fare of $73.50 mocked me from the screen, the price of my sudden, terrifying involvement. My instincts, honed by decades of dealing with drunk passengers, forgotten wallets and minor scuffles, screamed one single, unifying command: go. I reached back and roughly pulled the door shut, the heavy thud echoing too loudly in the night. The sound felt like a gunshot. I fumbled the gear shift into reverse, my foot trembling on the accelerator. I needed to backtrack, get out of this wooden cage, and forget Sam ever existed. But then, my eyes caught something in the beam of the reversing lights. Near the base of the dead oak, where Sam had made his final stand before melting into the night, there was a flash of something metallic. It wasn't a leaf or a stone. It was too regular, too deliberate. The old, curious part of me, the part that had listened to countless late-night confessions, overrode the terrified part. I killed the engine. I grabbed the heavy, battered flashlight I keep under my seat and pushed my door open. The night air was sharp, smelling of pine needles, damp earth, and something vaguely metallic like rust or old blood. I walked carefully back to the oak tree, shining the harsh beam onto the ground. It was a small silver locket, resting half buried in the dirt. It looked old, tarnished, and well-loved. It wasn't the kind of thing someone loses accidentally. It was something that gets ripped off or deliberately discarded as a breadcrumb. I picked it up. It was cold and heavy in my palm. The catch was flimsy, and with a slight tug, it opened. Inside, there were 2 miniature photographs. On one side, a blurry, smiling picture of Sam, much younger, his eyes full of light, not panic. On the other side, a picture of a little girl, maybe 5 years old, with bright, curious eyes and a missing front tooth. She was beautiful, and she looked familiar. I felt a cold wave of realization. This wasn't just a locket, it was a connection, a piece of his life, intentionally left behind. My heart twisted with a sudden, painful guilt. Sam wasn't just running from the consequences of a bad decision. He was running for his life, and he had a family. I stood there, holding the little locket, no longer just a driver, but a custodian of a secret. It was in that moment, when my focus was completely consumed by the locket and the innocent eyes of the little girl, that the true danger announced itself. Snap. It was the unmistakable sound of a dry twig breaking under a heavy boot, maybe 50 yards down the track, in the direction we had just come from. It wasn't an animal. It was too deliberate, too heavy. And it was followed by another sound, a low, static-laced hiss, like someone attempting to whisper into a radio. They were close. My panic returned with a violent surge, but this time it was laced with genuine, terrifying adrenaline. I wasn't just running from an unpaid fare. I was running from the people Sam had warned me about. I slammed the locket shut and jammed it into my deepest jacket pocket, a frantic, irreversible decision that bound me to Sam's fate. I bolted back to the car, my breath catching in my throat. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely find the keyhole, but I managed to turn the ignition. The engine roared to life, a sound that felt deafeningly loud in the oppressive silence of the woods, a massive beacon announcing my presence. I didn't bother turning around. I threw the car into drive and stomped on the gas pedal. The sedan lurched forward, tires spinning wildly in the loose dirt. I was driving blind, using the high beams to illuminate the twisting, rutted path. Tree branches scraped violently along the sides of the car, sounding like fingernails on a blackboard. I bounced violently in my seat, the lukewarm coffee mug flying off the console and hitting the passenger door with a dull thunk. I didn't slow down. I risked a quick glance in the rearview mirror. Nothing, just the dizzying tunnel of darkness closing in behind me. But I could feel them now. That sixth sense, the one the old-time cabbies cultivate, was screaming. They weren't just searching, they were hunting. The ride out of the woods was worse than the ride in. Every route felt like a spike, every bump a near accident. My elderly sedan, my livelihood, was taking a beating, but I pushed it harder, driven by the image of Sam's terrified eyes and the sound of that single snapping twig. Finally, the dark tunnel broke. My car hit the main road, the rough, neglected state road, with a jarring crash. I spun the wheel hard and accelerated back toward the city, putting distance between me and the dead oak. I didn't dare look back again. It took another half hour of white-knuckle driving before I reached a well-lit gas station 20 miles outside the city proper. I pulled into the empty lot, shut off the engine, and leaned my head back against the rest, sucking air into my lungs like I'd just surfaced from deep water. I was sweating, shaking, and utterly exhausted. The clock now read 3:45 a.m. I looked at my hands. They were steady now, but they still felt numb. The car was a mess. Scratches running the entire length of both sides, mud splattered everywhere, a telltale branch caught under the windshield wiper. I looked in the back seat. Sam was gone. The $73.50 remained unpaid, but I wasn't empty-handed. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the locket. It was warm from my body heat. The little girl with the missing tooth seemed to stare at me, a silent question in her eyes. This wasn't just a late-night fare anymore. This was a story with stakes, and I was holding the first crucial piece of evidence. I felt the immense, suffocating weight of my situation. I had witnessed a disappearance, and in retrieving this locket, I had become an accomplice, or maybe the next target. Sam's fear had jumped from the back seat to the front, and it was now mine. What did he mean? If you drop me here, they'll find me. He was telling me that my car, my presence, was protecting him up to that point. He left the car, the mobile beacon, to vanish into the untracked darkness. But then, why did they show up minutes later? Had they tracked his phone? The locket? Or had they been tracking my car all along, knowing where I was going, simply waiting for the moment he stepped out? The simple answer, the one that made my blood run cold, was that if they were tracking the car, they now knew two things. Sam was gone, and I was the one who drove him there. I was no longer Arthur, the anonymous cab driver. I was a witness, and the night felt suddenly much, much longer. I had to get home, but I couldn't. I couldn't go back to my quiet routine, not with this locket and this terror. I needed to understand what I was involved in. I needed to know who they were, and God help me, I needed to know what happened to Sam. I started the car again, but I didn't drive toward home. I drove toward the only other place I knew I could look for answers, the 14th Street Terminal, the pickup spot, where the nightmare began. Driving back towards the city was a different experience entirely. The highway, which had felt like a smooth, necessary corridor hours before, now seemed like a fishbowl, a wide open space where I was exposed. Every pair of headlights closing in from behind felt like a threat. Every car that passed felt like it was slowing just enough to get a look at the aging sedan. At me. The paranoia was thick and sour in my mouth. I kept my hand subconsciously touching the locket in my jacket pocket, its small, cool weight a confirmation that I hadn't dreamt the last hour. I was no detective, just an old man with a schedule. But I knew one thing. If Sam was running from professionals, going back to the source, the 14th Street Terminal was either the dumbest thing I could do or the only way to find the seam in their operation. I needed context. I needed to know what Sam had been doing, what he had been running from, before he got into my car. The pre-dawn light was just starting to tint the eastern sky with a sickly bruised purple when I finally reached the terminal. It was even more desolate than it had been when I arrived for the pickup. The few transit workers were still inside, preparing for the first rush. Outside, the world was grey and silent. I parked 3 blocks away, keeping the car on a quiet side street. I didn't want the damaged sedan attracting any attention. I walked the remaining distance, moving slowly, forcing myself to look casual. This was a neighborhood I knew intimately, but now I was seeing it through Sam's eyes, as a hunted animal sees the path. I approached the maintenance entrance where I had picked him up. The brick wall was damp and cold. I stood where he had stood, trying to feel the residual fear, trying to see what he had seen. Nothing, just an empty lot, scattered litter, and the hum of the city waking up. Then, I noticed the small details. On the ground, near the base of the wall, there was a faint, dark smear. It wasn't fresh. It was dried and flaky, but it looked suspiciously like the stain I had seen beneath the torn shoulder of Sam's shirt in the rearview mirror. I knelt down, ignoring the cold dampness that soaked my jeans. It was just a small, dark patch, nothing conclusive, but it was enough to make my stomach clench. More importantly, about 10 feet above where the smear was, stuck barely visible in the mortar between 2 bricks, was a small, nearly transparent plastic sticker. It was about the size of a postage stamp, dark grey with no visible markings. It looked like a piece of refuse, but something felt wrong. I pulled out my flashlight again despite the growing light and focused the beam on it. I've had police tape and surveillance cameras pointed at my cab plenty of times during my career. This wasn't a standard police marker. It was subtle, low profile. It looked like a simple adhesive patch, but the plastic material was thick, almost ceramic. I used the tip of my house key to scrape it off the mortar. When it came free, I saw that the back of the sticker had 2 tiny silver contact points, like a miniature battery terminal. It wasn't a sticker. It was a listening device, or maybe a localized tracker, a highly specialized piece of equipment meant to be inconspicuous and disposable. Sam wasn't just hiding from random thugs. He was hiding from people with resources, people who could place advanced surveillance equipment on a desolate wall in the middle of the night. They knew exactly where he was, within a 10-foot radius, before he even got into my car. I slipped the tiny device into the small coin pocket of my jeans. It was another anchor, another piece of evidence tying me to the mystery. I felt the familiar knot of fear, but this time it was laced with a steel thread of determination. I was tired of being afraid. I was angry at being used. As I straightened up, scanning the street one last time, my eyes landed on a parked vehicle half a block down the street. It was a black sedan, nondescript, the kind of car that doesn't belong and yet blends in everywhere. The windows were heavily tinted. It had been parked there the whole time I was searching. Now, as I looked at it, the brake lights flashed once, briefly, and then died. The driver wasn't putting their foot on the brake. They were releasing it, as if they had been sitting there, foot on the pedal, waiting. I froze, heart hammering. I quickly turned my back to the car, pretending to examine the nearby newspaper dispenser, but every sense I had was focused on that black sedan. After a tense minute, the black car finally pulled away. It didn't speed off. It drove slowly, deliberately, turning the corner and vanishing. It was a casual departure, too casual. It felt like an acknowledgement, a subtle sign that someone had seen me and had decided for now to let me go. Or maybe they simply got what they came for. I walked quickly back to my car, my mind racing. If that car belonged to them, they now knew I had returned to the pickup point. They knew I was investigating, and the timing of their departure, right after I scraped the device off the wall, was too perfect to be a coincidence. Had the device sent a signal when it was disturbed? Did they monitor the spot remotely? I got into my car and sat for a minute, analyzing the situation. Sam was injured before he got in the cab. The stain. Sam was tracked via a sophisticated device at the pickup point. He knew the car was his only safe zone, but he also knew that remaining on the main road was risky because they were organized. He deliberately vanished into the deep woods after dropping the locket, possibly to buy time or to leave a trail he knew they wouldn't follow easily. They were waiting for him to arrive at the terminal and immediately knew he was gone when my car left the track. Now, they were watching me. This wasn't about the 7350. This was about a life, a secret, and the silent threat that now clung to me like a second skin. I pulled out the locket again, running my thumb over the picture of the little girl. Why did Sam leave this? It wasn't just a sentimental object. It was a clue, a key. I realized I couldn't go to the police. If they were this professional, the police would either dismiss me as a crazy old cabbie or worse, hand the information right back to whoever was hunting Sam. I was on my own, and my only leverage was the locket and the tiny, sophisticated tracker in my pocket. I needed to find out who the little girl was. Sam hadn't given me a name, but the face in that tiny picture was my new destination. It was the only tangible link to Sam's life. I started the engine, pulling away from the curb slowly. The time for blind fear was over. Now, it was about calculated risk. I was going home, not to rest, but to find my old street maps, dig up some old contacts, and start figuring out what kind of hell Sam had dropped me into. The hunt was on, and I had just chosen my side. I didn't drive straight into my garage. That's the first thing you learn when you've been doing this job for 40 years. Always check your mirrors and never let the routine become predictable. I drove past my quiet street twice, circling the neighborhood like a hawk. Everything looked normal. Lawns cut, paper boxes upright, the faint scent of dew on the clipped hedges, but the normality felt thin, like a painted backdrop. I was looking for the black sedan, or any car that had the wrong kind of silence in it. Satisfied, or at least resigned, I finally pulled into the driveway. It was 4:30 a.m. My house, which usually felt like a sanctuary of lukewarm coffee and comfortable worn armchairs, now felt exposed, a flimsy shield against the professional malice Sam had warned me about. I stripped off my mud-stained jacket and went straight to my workbench in the garage. This wasn't a detective's office, but it was where I fixed things, where I put broken pieces back together. I laid out the two objects, the small, tarnished silver locket and the almost invisible plastic tracker. First, the tracker. I put on my reading glasses and used a jeweler's loupe, one I usually used for tinkering with watches. The craftsmanship of the device was unsettling. It wasn't homemade. The silver contacts were micro-welded, and the plastic shell was designed to mimic debris. This was specialized government-grade surveillance, or corporate security that wished it was government-grade. They're organized, Sam had said. He wasn't exaggerating. Whoever they were, they had deep pockets and powerful technology. They hadn't needed to chase him through the woods. They just needed to confirm he'd arrived, and they had the tools to do it remotely. And now, I had stolen their eye. I smashed the tiny device with the blunt end of a hammer, not because I thought it would stop them, but because I needed the psychological release. The small, satisfying crunch was the first moment of control I'd felt all night. Then, the locket. This was the real challenge. The little girl's face was clear, but without a name, it was just a picture. The internet would be too risky, too easy to trace a search query, too easy to draw attention to myself. I needed an analog solution, something outside the digital net. I thought of old Charlie. Charlie used to run a private investigation firm that specialized in background checks before the tech boom made him obsolete. He was retired, living off-grid out in Vermont, but we still traded Christmas cards. More importantly, Charlie had a network of information brokers, retired cops, former DMV clerks, and media archivists. People who knew how to find a name from a face, using old databases and favors. I found my old flip phone, the one I kept for emergencies, the one with the prepaid minutes, and went out to the garden shed, just in case my house phone was compromised. I called Charlie's ancient landline. It rang 5 times, 6 times. Then his gravelly voice answered. "You're calling awful early, Arthur. Trouble in the city." I cut straight to the chase, my voice low and urgent. "Charlie, I need a name. Fast. I've got a picture, a child, maybe 5 years old, missing front tooth. She's in danger. It's high stakes, the kind of trouble that'll get me driving through a swamp." I held the flip phone against the locket and took a quick, grainy picture. I knew Charlie hated getting texts, but I sent it anyway, a lifeline cast into the digital ocean. Charlie grunted. "Looks like a job for Benny. He handles the family records. Expensive, Arthur. And I need to know why you're involved." "Unpaid fare," I said, a bitter half-truth. "The passenger left this. I owe him this much." Charlie didn't press. He was an old soul who knew the difference between a lie and a truth you weren't ready to tell. Stay put. Don't touch your computer. Don't talk to anyone. I'll call you back on this burner. He hung up. The waiting was the worst. I paced my kitchen, the silence of the morning amplified by the lack of sleep. I boiled water for tea, but the steam felt oily. The whole house felt hostile. I kept checking the street from behind the curtain. The sun was fully up now, but the light didn't bring comfort, only clearer visibility for my hunters. Then my old instincts kicked in. I went to the front window again, but this time I looked not at the street, but at my own car parked in the driveway. The scratch marks were obvious, and something else. Near the back tire, a small, meticulously placed piece of gravel was sitting exactly in the center of a mud splatter. It was too centered, too deliberate. It hadn't been there when I drove past the first 2 times. Someone had been here. They had been close enough to put a marker on the car, a subtle signal to confirm they had the right vehicle. They hadn't needed the tracker. The dirt from the quarry road was enough. They saw the damage, they recognized the mud, and they left me a signature, a warning. The realization was a punch to the gut. They weren't just watching the terminal, they were watching me. They knew where I lived. Just as the dread peaked, the burner phone buzzed. It was Charlie. "Got it, Arthur. Fast job. You owe me big." The girl's name is Clara Hansen, age 6. Missing person report filed 2 weeks ago. The father, your passenger, is Elias Hansen. He was a data engineer for a major defense contractor, Etherodyne Solutions. He was placed under corporate investigation for misappropriation of highly classified data. They're not looking for a lost kid, Arthur. They're looking for a traitor and a very dangerous secret. They're military-industrial. They play dirty. Elias Hansen, Clara Hansen. The locket had done its job, but the truth was far worse than an unpaid fare. It wasn't a crime of passion or a street robbery. It was espionage, corporate theft. And now, I was standing between a powerful, shadowy corporation and the secret Elias had carried in the back of my cab. I looked at the locket, at Clara's innocent smile. I was holding the heart of the secret. If Elias was a traitor, this little girl was the only leverage he had left. And if he left her picture with me, it meant he intended for me to find her. My life was irrevocably changed. I wasn't going to look for answers anymore. I was going to look for a little girl. "Charlie," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. "Get me everything you can on Etherodyne Solutions. Everything." I hung up, went to the garage, and began meticulously cleaning the mud from my car. Not to hide the evidence, but to eliminate their marker. I was entering the war zone now, and my old sedan was the only armor I had. The rules of the road were cancelled. With the name Clara Hansen ringing in my ears and the identity of they confirmed as a shadow organization called Etherodyne, the quiet of my garage was instantly replaced by the deafening roar of danger. I had maybe an hour, maybe less, before their subtle marker leaving turned into a full-scale raid. I moved quickly, relying on the instinct that had kept me alive in bad parts of the city for half my life. I grabbed my go bag, a worn canvas messenger bag containing a reserve of cash, a change of clothes, maps, and my father's old hunting knife, unused for years but sharp as a razor. Before leaving, I poured the remaining lukewarm tea into the sink, smeared the cup with jam, and left it sitting on the table, a clumsy illusion of normalcy. If they came, I wanted them to think I'd just stepped out for a paper. My main focus, however, was the locket. Elias hadn't just dropped a piece of jewelry. He had deposited a clue. I held it under the harsh utility light. The face of Clara was sweet, heartbreakingly innocent, but the background of the photograph was what I needed to see. It was slightly blurry, but behind her I could make out a distinctive structure. A large, elaborate stone fountain surrounded by stunted, ancient-looking cedar trees. I knew the fountain. It wasn't the famous one downtown, but the one tucked away in Fairview Park, the oldest, most neglected public space in the city. It was remote, barely maintained, and rarely visited after dark. It was the perfect place for someone to hide, or, more likely, to leave someone hidden. But what about the locket itself? I ran my thumb over the back casing. It was smooth, but my old calloused fingertips caught on the faintest irregularity. I used the loop again. Engraved so finely it was almost microscopic was a string of digits. 40 and fund 1 day n 74 well 590 w. Not a code, but a set of coordinates, a location. I quickly cross-referenced the coordinates on my paper map before I left the house. They pointed not to Fairview Park, but to an address downtown, a high-rise commercial building, completely incongruous with the park. Was it a double bluff? Or was the high-rise the location of the secret Elias had stolen, and the park the location of the girl? The locket had two secrets, just like it had two pictures. I had to choose the most likely sanctuary. I chose the park. The coordinates were too specific, too dangerous to use casually. The park, the picture of his daughter, that was the father's heart speaking. I backed my sedan out of the driveway, forcing myself to look calm. I drove the first 2 blocks defensively, not aggressively. I passed a delivery truck, a jogging enthusiast, and a woman walking her dog. Everything looked fine, but as I approached the junction leading to the main artery, I saw it. The black sedan, pulled over 3 blocks away, ostensibly fixing a flat tire. The man leaning over the hood wasn't using a jack. He was using a pair of binoculars. They hadn't just tracked me. They were performing a slow-burn stakeout, and I had just driven right into their sight line. I accelerated hard, blowing through a yellow light. They were too far to follow immediately, but I knew the game had just shifted from surveillance to pursuit. I needed to get off the main roads and into the maze of the city's old downtown, where the grids were confusing and the traffic lights were my weapon. The chase began in earnest on the 4th Street overpass. I glanced in the mirror and saw the black sedan, now easily distinguishable, cutting through traffic with a dangerous disregard for the law. They weren't using sirens. They were using sheer speed and intimidation. They were coming for the locket, for the tracker I had destroyed, and for me. I took a sharp right into the historic district, a series of narrow cobbled streets designed for carriages, not modern sedans. This was my territory. I knew these corners. My sedan was older, less powerful, but more agile. I used a double-parked delivery van to screen my move, turning down an alleyway that was barely wide enough for my side mirrors. The squeal of their tires as they tried to replicate the turn told me they were less familiar with the terrain. "Come on, Arthur," I muttered to myself, the old man fighting the good fight. "Show them what 40 years on the meter teaches you." I drove like a maniac, ignoring traffic signals, mounting the curb briefly to bypass a slow bus. The fear was a constant buzzing static in my brain, but it was being overridden by a primal focus, the image of Clara Hansen. I was doing this for her. The black sedan was tenacious. They appeared again 3 blocks later, gaining fast on a straightaway. The driver was ruthless, leaning on his horn, flashing his lights. I knew I couldn't outrun them, only outmaneuver them. My escape route led to the old municipal market, a vast open space that was just beginning to fill with early morning vendors and delivery trucks. It was chaos. Perfect. I cut the wheel and drove straight across the market square, weaving between pallets of fresh produce and startled workers. The sight of my old cab blasting through a fruit delivery was enough to cause the kind of visual disruption that police use. The black sedan hesitated, unable to risk the same level of property damage and exposure. I saw the passenger raise a hand in frustration. I had bought myself minutes. I used those minutes to hit the interstate on-ramp, heading north directly toward Fairview Park. I kept my speed aggressive but controlled, blending into the flow of commuter traffic. I knew they would call ahead, that they would anticipate my destination based on the available routes. They knew I was heading out of the city. As I drove, I looked down at the locket, still clutched in my left hand. I felt a surge of cold dread, not for myself, but for the girl. If the coordinates referred to the stolen data, and if Elias had vanished to draw their attention away from the data and onto himself, then Clara was the ultimate decoy. Elias had bet his daughter's life on my curiosity. I was heading toward Fairview Park, toward the old stone fountain. It was my only lead, and I was being pursued by people who thought nothing of risking a high-speed chase through a crowded city. I had to assume that Etherodyne would already have people staked out there, waiting for Elias to show up for his daughter. I wasn't Elias. but I was the one bringing the locket. The park entrance sign loomed ahead, dark green against the brightening sky. I pulled off the highway and drove into the protective shadow of the massive old park gates. The game was about to enter its final, deadly stage. I drove slowly through the winding, overgrown paths of Fairview Park. The morning sun was still weak, filtered by the thick canopy of ancient trees, casting long, nervous shadows. The park was deserted, which felt less like luck and more like a carefully manicured trap. My hands were sweating on the wheel. I knew Etherodyne wouldn't be far behind, and every crunch of my tires on the gravel sounded like a death knell. I reached the fountain, the stone monument visible through the cedar trees. It was massive, grey and completely dry, its basin filled with leaves and debris. A grim, beautiful landmark for a final confrontation. I stopped the car maybe 50 yards away, out of the immediate open space. I grabbed my father's knife, a useless gesture against armed professionals, but a necessary comfort. I stepped out of the car, the locket hot in my hand. I walked toward the fountain, scanning the trees. The air was dead quiet, too quiet. Then I heard them. Not tires spinning wildly, but two distinct sets of heavy, deliberate footsteps approaching from opposite sides of the park entrance. They were using a pincer movement. They were patient. They were confident. They knew I was here. I had maybe 30 seconds before I was surrounded. I wasn't going to find Clara by looking under a bush. Elias had planned this. He knew I was the link. I ran to the fountain. The statue at the center depicted a water nymph holding a carved shell. I frantically examined the stone. There was no sign of Clara, no sign of a recent disturbance. My heart sank. Elias had led me to a dead end. I looked desperately at the nymph's stone shell, running my hand over the cold, rough surface. It was here, at the most personal spot, that he had to have hidden the key. I pulled the locket from my pocket, ready to leave it as a counterclue, when my thumb brushed the backside of the pendant. The tiny, micro-etched coordinates, 47,127 degrees N, 74.059 degrees W, were the final message. They weren't the destination. They were the target. I realized the genius of Elias's move. He had led Etherodyne's field team to the quarry road, drawing them into a fruitless chase for him. He had led me to the park, a sentimental spot, to reveal the coordinates of the stolen data. He wasn't running to save himself. He was running to expose them. The little girl's picture in the locket was his trust. The coordinates were his weapon. The park was the decoy for the weapon. Thud, thud. Two doors slammed shut simultaneously behind me. They were here. I turned, just as two figures, tall, dressed in dark tactical gear with earpieces, emerged from the trees, blocking the path back to the car. "Old man," one of them growled, his voice flat and menacing. "Drop the necklace. This isn't your fight." I gripped the locket tighter. "I'm just a taxi driver, looking for an unpaid fare." The second man stepped forward, pointing something small and dark, a taser at my chest. "The fare is paid in full, Arthur. Now, the locket." I knew what to do. I didn't run. I didn't fight. I threw the locket hard against the stone nymph, right into the center of the dry fountain. The silver necklace snapped, and the locket skittered across the dusty basin, landing open-faced. The two agents immediately diverted their attention. They weren't focused on me. They were focused on the object. That was my opening. I turned and sprinted back toward my car. They shouted, but they didn't shoot. They wanted the locket intact. They were committed to the object, not the casualty. Their precision was their weakness. I dove into my car, ignoring their shouts, jammed the key and threw the gear shift into reverse. I backed up hard, spinning the wheel, and slammed the car into drive, heading not out the entrance they were guarding, but through the overgrown hedge on the opposite side of the park. My car was battered again, but I was moving. I heard the frantic rush of their footsteps, but they were too late. I was out, onto a small side street, and vanishing into the early rush hour traffic. I didn't look back. I drove straight to the coordinates, the high-rise commercial building downtown. It was the headquarters of Etherodyne Solutions. Elias hadn't meant for me to break in. He meant for me to send a message. I parked near the entrance, pulled out my flip phone, and dialed Charlie. "Charlie, forget the girl. She's not here. The coordinates point to the Etherodyne building. Elias left the locket with the coordinates to force their hand. He must have given the data to a third party or scheduled an automatic release tied to this location. The data, the real secret, is about to drop. Charlie was silent for a moment. That son of a gun. He used you as his delivery beacon, Arthur. You're still involved. I know, I said, looking up at the imposing steel and glass tower. But I'm not running anymore. Call your media contacts. Tell them an anonymous source has flagged a massive data dump about Etherodyne Solutions, tied to a missing data engineer named Elias Hansen, and the precise coordinates of the data are outside the main lobby right now. I smashed the flip phone with my heel, destroying the last link. I had done my part. The hunt was now public. I drove away from the building, melting back into the flow of traffic, the early morning sun reflecting off my battered, mud-splattered sedan. The adrenaline faded, replaced by profound exhaustion. I was Arthur, the old cab driver. I was $73.50 short, but I was also the man who had helped an innocent father expose a massive corporate conspiracy. Elias had vanished into the woods, but his message lived on, carried by the locket I had thrown and the coordinates I had revealed. I never saw Elias Hansen again. I never found out what happened to Clara, only that the story broke wide open that day, and that the coordinates I provided led the authorities and the press exactly where they needed to be. I drove home slowly, carefully. I was no hero, but I was no longer just a driver. I was a gatekeeper of the city's deepest secrets, and I had earned my stripes one last time. Every passenger who got into my cab after that day was riding with a ghost, a hero, and an old man who knew that the most dangerous secrets in the world were sometimes carried in an empty back seat. The meter was off. The night was over.